Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to our channel, Wisdom Seekers of the State Islamic Universities Antasari, Banjarmasin. Today we are honored to be here with a distinguished guest from the University of Edinburgh, namely Dr. Kholoud Ajarma. Welcome to Banjarmasin, to Antasari.
Thank you.
Yeah, ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban.
Shukr.
Yeah, yeah. You came here yesterday for an international seminar. What was the topic of the seminar? You remember?
The seminar was about Islam in the digital age and
Uh-huh.
like how we look at these new developments within Islam and the study of Islam and the Muslim world.
Okay, it's very currently topic and very interesting one.
Yes.
And today we're gonna talk about your academic career and your maybe briefly about your life, and then we're gonna talk about your research probably, and then finally about our cooperation, possible cooperations. So I've heard that you studied in the University of Groningen, yeah, in Holland. Then when was that?
I did. I started in 2015.
2015.
Yes.
Okay.
And I defended my thesis finally in 2020.
Okay. You're much younger than me. I finished my PhD in 26.
Okay.
Yeah, 2006. I mean,
Yeah, 2006.
yeah, 2006. And then I came back here. Who was your supervisor?
Professor Mario Batalar.
Uh-huh. And the topic of your thesis was?
My thesis was called Mecca in Morocco, Articulations of Muslim Pilgrimage in Moroccan Everyday Life.
Wow. Mecca in Morocco.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's part of a larger project funded by the Netherlands Research Institute, NWO. And the project itself looks at modern articulations of the Muslim pilgrimage. So it's consisting of 5 different projects.
Oh.
Mine was based in Morocco to look at how Muslims see the Hajj or the Muslim pilgrimage in general. But there were also projects looking at Hajj from a historical perspective and more from contemporary perspective, but among Muslims in the diaspora, so Muslims in the Netherlands.
Okay. Are you Moroccan or?
No, I'm Palestinian.
No? Oh, you're Palestinian. So your educational background was in Palestine or
Yes.
from kindergarten to?
Yes, I was born in Aida refugee camp in Bethlehem in the West Bank. And then I studied there in the camp in a primary school, and then in the governmental secondary school. And then I did my BA in Bethlehem University as well. And then after that, I did my MA and MPhil outside.
Where is it?
I did my MA in the University of Coventry in the UK.
Oh, in the UK.
Yes, and I did my MPhil in Bergen University.
Bergen
in
is
Norway.
Norway.
Yes.
So you travel around the world.
Yes, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. And then you go to Holland and
Yes.
then back to UK.
Yeah, now in the UK.
Very interesting. And but if you study Moroccan, then you can speak Arabic to them. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I'm Arab by origin.
Yeah.
But Moroccan Darija, the local Moroccan Arabic is a bit different.
Oh, a bit different.
Yeah, so it has a lot of influences from other languages and also the Berber language, which is like some of the indigenous communities there. And also like some of the Arabic, excuse me, some of the Arabic itself is a bit like Quranic Arabic that we don't use in our daily lives. So it was fascinating
the
for
Fusha
me.
Arabic.
Yeah. So some from Fusha, but also some expressions that we don't use, but they're Arabic. But because we don't use in our daily lives, people think, oh, is this Arabic or not?
So then it is a very fascinating experience.
It was,
So you did your field work in the Netherlands and also in Morocco.
Yeah, I did my studies in the Netherlands and then field work in Morocco for about 2 years on and off.
Wow.
And then I did two
In which
trips.
cities?
I started in Fez.
Fez, or it's
Yeah,
very old city.
it's very old and very beautiful, very
Yes.
hot as well.
Yeah, very hot.
Very hot,
How hot
yeah.
it is? I mean,
I think it reaches like 40, 45 in the summer. Yeah,
wow.
it's really hot. Yeah.
Wow.
So, but Moroccans don't mind, I think. So the
No,
family that I was living with
they are accustomed to it.
were accustomed to it and they were
Yeah.
really nice. And then
Ah,
after that, I moved to Mohammedia, which is between Rabat and Casablanca,
Rabat and Casablanca.
to be able to go to the three cities if I need to.
Mm.
And then I did a bit of research in Safi on the west coast and in Husima in the north coast.
Oh,
So I traveled a
wow, you
bit.
travel a lot.
Yes,
Yeah. Wow, it's very fascinating experience.
it was, yeah.
And you interview people and the ulama as well.
Yeah, I interviewed mainly people who wanted to go on Hajj and people who did go and people who couldn't go.
Aha.
And also government officials to see the process and how the process works within like the official discourse. And also I spoke to like different people in mosques where like these Hajj or like pilgrimage ritual sessions happen. And also went to the airport many times to see the like the goodbyes
Oh,
and the
yes.
welcoming.
Maybe the rituals accompanying that
Oh yes,
event.
yes.
Oh,
Accompanying the pilgrims and
yeah.
what happens when they leave.
Oh,
So it was very emotional as well.
yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I think in Indonesia there are
It's
many
similar.
similarities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how long it takes from Morocco? I mean, the flight from Morocco to Saudi Arabia. I mean,
I think it's around 8 hours if I'm not mistaken.
oh, 8
No,
hours.
maybe a bit
Quite
less.
long. Quite
Maybe a
long.
bit less.
Oh, okay.
But the trip itself is more than the actual flight time. So the actual flight time is the easy part, let's say.
Yeah.
Because before that it takes about a year of preparation between
Wow.
application processes
yeah.
and then the payment and then
Yeah.
all these rituals of having a party before they
Yeah,
go
yeah.
and then preparing for when they come.
I see.
So there's a lot of ritualistic stuff happening
yeah,
alongside the
yeah.
bureaucratic stuff that would lead people to go actually on pilgrimage.
Well, there's something come to my mind. In Indonesia, if you went for Hajj, then you got the title Hajj.
Of course.
And how about Moroccans? It's the same or not?
Yeah, it's very interesting
Yeah,
topic
yeah.
because I think everywhere people get the title.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and in Moroccan Arabic, it's Hajj for a man and
Yeah.
Hajja for a woman.
Yes.
And it's very contested because people respect those who've been to
Yep.
Hajj, so they are
Yeah.
given the title,
Yep.
and it comes with a lot of prestige because
Yeah.
you're considered, if you've been to Hajj, you're considered more religious,
Yeah.
and then people would invite you to events and
Yeah.
then would ask you to make prayers on their
Yeah.
behalf and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting.
Ah.
But also there are people who would contest it. So
Yeah.
they'll say, okay, a person who went to Hajj did a ritual that
Yeah.
God asked them to do,
Yes.
which
Yes.
is great.
Yes.
But why should I call them that? So you wouldn't call somebody who prays 5 times a day
Yeah, yeah.
al-Musalli, for example.
Al-Muzakki wal
Or
Musalli wal-
al-Muzakki. Yeah, exactly. So why al-Hajj in
Yes,
particular?
yes.
So some people would make these arguments,
Yeah.
but still, they would still call a person who've been to Hajj al-Hajj. They will
Yes.
show respect.
Ah.
Yeah.
Do you think it is something to do with colonial, legacy?
Not the colonial legacy as such, but it does have a historical roots.
Okay.
So, for example, in Morocco specifically, and I assume in Indonesia even more,
Yes.
a long time ago, it was very hard to do the journey.
Yep.
So those who went to Hajj, for example, from Morocco, had to go either on foot or on animals, like a camel or a horse
Yeah,
or a
yeah.
donkey. And then the journey itself would take at least a year, crossing the desert and
Yes.
to reach Mecca and so on.
Uh-huh.
So those who lived to Hajj, they assume that they'll never come back. So they, before leaving, they would, if they're married, they'll divorce the wife because then they'll give her freedom if if they don't return.
Oh, yeah.
They literally would behave like they're dying. So they'll settle all their debts. They'll pay farewell for the family, because in many cases they wouldn't return, either because they would die on the way because it was a very hard trip, or when they reached Mecca and finally did the Hajj, they would decide to go around or stay in Mecca and learn more about religion and so on, or end up in Jerusalem or in Cairo and many of these closer cities, let's say, that were like educational centers for Muslims at the time. So because of that, it was very hard for a person to actually go and come back. And when they do that, as a sign of respect, they were called al-Hajj, and then they were very distinguished, because if you actually accomplished it, it was very special. Whereas today, thousands of people do it. So
nothing special, actually.
Well, I think it is still special for many people, because like religiously, it is like you answered the call of God in a way. So like adhan fi nasi bil hajj. So it's like they listen to that adhan from God, but also because of the bureaucracy today and what you said about colonization that ended up with modern day national states or nation states that have borders and application processes,
visa and so on.
visas, exactly, and the quota system and so on. So you no longer just take your horse and go to Mecca. You have to apply, and in Indonesia I heard it's like 20 or 30 years of waiting if you want to go to Hajj,
especially for people here.
Exactly,
the waiting list is very long.
The registration process is very long. And in Morocco it's different. They have a qur'a system, so like a lottery. But still, you might apply 7 times or 8 times without being selected. So it is still a privilege to be able to do it. And
so
of
it
course,
is still something special.
And financially, it needs also years of saving and so on. So it's not very easy still today. So I think that's why those who manage to do it feel also that they have the privilege that they were able to.
In Indonesian history, I just suspect, I'm not very sure. I think the colonial government, the Dutch colonial government, actually also want to register those who went for Hajj, and the title Hajj is one of the identification also, because they suspected that those who return from the holy cities will become the rebellious people, against the colonial.
So they learn things there.
And that really happened also here in the history of Banjari Sultanate. I mean, in the 19th century of Banjar War, I mean, the Hajj were people who were involved in these rebellious activities against the colonial government. I'm not sure what happened in Morocco. Maybe it's different.
That's fascinating. I think during the colonial times, the French tried also to manage the process as a way of like managing the state, in a way, but also at some point, and I think that was before the French, I think it was more under the Portuguese, if I'm not mistaken, that there were fatwas that prohibited Hajj, because the ulama at the time told the people it's more important to stay here and fight. Jihad was seen as more important than the Hajj. And it's more important to fight the colonizers than to go to Mecca. So at some point also that was like a very important aspect.
It is a kind of inversion from here. I mean,
so there are so many historical aspects that are fascinating to look at.
And another one is like in Indonesia, when the Muslim middle class, become bigger and bigger, the rise of new middle class, I think in the early 1990s up to now, there has been also travel agents who serve for this upper middle class. It's an elite of pilgrimage.
Absolutely.
Do you find the same?
Absolutely. It is more and more becoming contested in that way as well, because the ideal of pilgrimage is this equality between people, and you go there, you dress in the same way, you do the same rituals. But today, more and more, we see these class differences. So for example, if you can afford it, you stay in a 5-star hotel, you see the Kaaba from your room, and then if you can't, you live in a very, very deserted place. Well, there are transportation for sure, but still it's a different experience.
Of course.
And also what you say about this tourism aspect of it. So in Morocco, for example, there are people who would go on Hajj, but then stop in Istanbul for 3 days to do shopping, or in Dubai. So there are these packages, because at the end of the day, people are paying a lot of money, so they want to take as much of the experience as possible beyond the religious. So the religious is important, but also the other aspects. And there are people who go there for their honeymoon, for example, as a honeymoon destination. And more younger people go, which is also because of this rise of the educated middle class.
Okay, so then it's similar to what happened in Indonesia.
I think so.
Well, now we move on to your experience in the University of Edinburgh. I imagine this university, very classical university, names of the old scholars came to my mind. For instance, who is the translator of Ma'nawi into English? The first one, Nicholson. Is he there? Was he there? R.A. Nicholson. Do you know him?
I think so, but I'm not sure at which
Montgomery
stage.
Ward.
Yeah.
I think also there.
Yeah.
And then I remember about Gifford lecture. This very prestigious Gifford lecture. So it is very interesting. You could enter this university, and it is very prestigious, I think, to become a lecturer there. Tell us about your experience and how you get involved in that university.
Well, first, alhamdulillah, I think I applied for the right job in the right time. That was what happened, really. Because I finished my PhD during COVID. So it was a bit difficult, because a lot of places shifted to online education, and the education system in general was affected very much by the pandemic. And as I was finishing my PhD, I also was teaching at the University of Groningen. So I was teaching Introduction to Islam, and also some research methods and so on. And that gave me a good experience, I think, for my CV. And at the same time, I also did a lot of voluntary work, and worked in the Middle East and so on. So I think I developed a good enough CV to compete. But also there was a lot of competition. So I applied for several positions, and my interest was mainly to teach either anthropology of Islam or Islam in the modern world, because I do contemporary Islam. And then I saw this position that was opening up for a new MSc at the University of Edinburgh. And it kind of looked like it was meant for me, because it kind of ticked all the right boxes. It was like modern Islam, it was MSc in the globalized Muslim world. So it was not only like modern Islam, but like the global Islam today. And it was under the Faculty of Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies. So it's also something that I'm...
It's very old faculty,
It is, very old. And a very interesting mixture of scholars there, between those who do more historical and textual analysis of the Middle East and Islam, and more modern and political and so on. So I applied, and I did the whole process, and then I was accepted, and it was
When was that?
That was the end of 2020.
2020.
Yes.
Okay.
And
2 years
then
ago.
and then it took a bit for the bureaucratic stuff, because it was during COVID, and I couldn't physically go to the UK at the time, and I had to apply for a visa.
And you were in the Netherlands, or?
I was in the Netherlands. I was still in Groningen.
Okay.
And at the time, a lot of countries still had their airports closed, or if you had to go, you have to do quarantine and so on. So an Indonesian friend who's a colleague as well, she was coming from the US, and she got appointed at the same time almost for a fellow in Southeast Asian studies.
Okay.
And then she came almost 2 months after because of how difficult it was to come from the US to the UK at the time.
Wow.
It was easier for me, I think, because it's like 1 hour flight. And then I did like the quarantine at home, but she had to do the quarantine at hotel. So you probably remember how these past 2 years were.
So
So
it's a very difficult time.
Yeah, exactly. So it took some time for me to actually physically move to Edinburgh. And then even when I did, it was almost 4 months before I could see colleagues because everyone was working from home. And when I started, we started hybrid. So we did some lectures in person, but mostly online.
Do you have many students or not in the Islamic studies, in Middle Eastern studies?
We have several programs. So the different programs have different numbers of students.
It is an MA or undergraduate programs?
There are both, but the MSc in Globalized Muslim World is an MA program.
An MA?
Yes.
Okay.
But next year, starting this September, we're giving also like our courses are also offered to undergrads.
Oh. Very interesting.
Yes.
How is it related to this Al-Walid
Prince Al-Walid
Center for the Study of Islam in the Contemporary World? Is it in the faculty? Or?
Yes, so Al-Walid Center is part of the faculty. There are many research centers within the university in general, and Al-Walid Center is one of them. And the center's work focuses on Islam. Not only from an education or academic perspective, but also it has outreach activities about Muslims and Islam, and it also does the colleagues do workshops and activities with schools and with community members and so on. So the idea is to raise the understanding of Islam in the contemporary world, but also in a country like the UK, raise the understanding of like the lives of Muslims and how like different Muslim communities bring richness to the community as well. And from an academic perspective, which is more what I do, is to study Muslim societies and raise the knowledge about Muslim societies around the world. So my research focuses in the past on Morocco and Palestine and mostly the Middle East. But we have a colleague, for example, who does Indonesia and like Southeast Asian studies. We have a colleague who does Muslims in Europe and so on. So it's very diverse and international in a way to bring about like a global understanding of Islam to the students.
Well, very interesting because it is like a scientific research, but on the other hand, it is an engagement in society.
Yes, absolutely.
So I see here the slogan of the center promoting a better understanding of contemporary Islam in the globalized Muslim world.
Yes,
it is very, very good. I mean, very interesting, because when I live in the Netherlands, I found some problems. I mean, for the Muslim immigrants there, especially when the incident of killing Theo van Gogh, if you remember, a long time ago. I was there.
Oh, you were there. Okay.
And my wife, experienced something because she used this hate covering, and then the police suspected her, something like that.
Yes.
Because of the incident. And then I think there are political parties who are not really supportive or even against the Muslim immigrants. And I think this also happened in other European countries like UK.
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell us something about this a little bit.
Well, unfortunately, I think many of the mainstream media shows a negative image in general about Islam and Muslims.
Yeah, that's true.
And it is in general that the media looks for, you know, the headlines and the big
Yeah,
stories.
yes.
So they wouldn't go to like a normal Muslim family doing
No.
their everyday life and
Yeah.
going to school and so on. They'll go to an extremist
Yep.
to cover a story about an extremist
Yep.
Muslim, for
Yep.
example.
Yep.
So because of this, the normal people and the people who don't have like engagement with Muslims,
Yeah.
they'll only have the image that they see on TV. And this
Yeah.
doesn't only include the news. For example, Hollywood movies that always shows the Arab as the bad guy
Yeah.
or the Muslim as the terrorist and so on.
Yes, yes.
So all these negative stereotypes get to the people. And I think that is why a lot of people have prejudice about Islam and Muslims.
Yeah.
And many people who would have these prejudices, they've never even, I don't know, spoke face to face to a Muslim about it or
No.
asked about it and so
No.
on.
No.
And Islam is like any religion. Like if I'm a Muslim and I do something bad,
Yeah.
it's not that all Muslims are doing this thing or
No.
all Muslims are bad.
Yeah.
So Islam is a very diverse religion.
Yep.
And this is what not many people understand.
No.
So that's why I had experiences with that myself as well.
Okay.
Yeah, with people, for example, telling me, "Oh, we've never knew that a Muslim woman can go out in public," and they probably saw so many women in public.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then when they spoke to one, they just voiced these kind of
yeah.
opinions.
Yeah, yeah.
Or they'll say, "I like, do you have to get married when you are 15?" And then where do you get these ideas from? So they have all these, especially when it comes to women.
Yes.
They have all these misconceptions and stereotypical images.
Yeah.
So I think, I had that myself. And I think
yeah.
it's also one of the reasons why I wanted to teach Islam and study Islam
Yeah,
more.
yeah.
Is it started because I met all these people who would tell me about how they expected Muslims to behave or Muslim women to behave.
Are there any programs, community engagement or a conversation or dialogue or whatever that you do or the center is doing now in the UK or Edinburgh?
Absolutely.
How to
So
deal with that?
yes. So I personally, so far, I haven't been involved much with these programs because I started during COVID and many of the personal engagement programs were shifted a bit online or were postponed or canceled, you know, because of the situation of the COVID restrictions. But before that, and now it's coming back, my colleagues have been working on community engagement where they would go to community centers or to local schools or to local NGOs and talk about Islam in a simple manner to local communities. One of the initiatives that the center is involved with and one of my colleagues works on, for example, is related to migrants or refugees. So, for example, Syrian refugees who come to the UK and how we raise awareness about like their engagement within the community, how to develop their engagement within the community, and also how to get the community more acceptant or more open towards them. So this is one of the things we work on. There are many refugee activities. One of the programs also that is very interesting is related to getting school students interested in doing higher education. Because although we have more and more universities and university students, a lot of students choose to either drop out after high school or choose maybe not suitable subjects because they don't have a variety of knowledge about what subjects are actually there. So what we do is that I spoke to one of the groups, but also many of my colleagues did. We talk to kids in, say, 4th grade or 5th grade, and in a very simple manner to tell them about what we do in order to introduce them to what we do at the center as like engagement within Islam, but also as a way to encourage them that this is something you can be doing in the future, you know, pursuing a university degree or doing an academy, a job in academy and so on. So this is also part of the public engagement that we do.
Wow, amazing. I mean, very nice. Yeah,
it's really interesting.
Something that is I found when I was in the Netherlands about the Moroccan community. when I studied in the Netherlands, I stayed in Leiden, and around the university, there is a mosque.
Yes.
A mosque called Al Hijrah Mosque, and it is the mosque of the Moroccan Muslims.
Yes.
I used to pray there for a Jum'ah prayer, Friday prayer.
Yes.
Because the khutbah was in Arabic.
Yes.
So I can understand the khutbah. And then I went back to Indonesia and I came back to the Netherlands. I pray again in this mosque.
Yeah.
And then I found that the khatib, the preacher, spoke the Netherlands.
Okay.
The language of the Holland.
Yeah.
And then I talked to people and they said, yes, this is the problem of the gap between generations. You know, the second or the third or the fourth generation, they don't understand Arabic anymore. So if they want to understand religion, they have to speak Netherlands, the Dutch language.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happened in the UK about this. I mean, the gap between generation, do you find it? And
I think it is very difficult to generalize because even in the Netherlands, I've had similar experiences where I've been to places where people would only speak the khutbah in one language or in Arabic. But the interesting case in the Netherlands is because the largest Muslim community or the largest migrant community is Turkish. So there are Turkish mosques as well, and there are Moroccan mosques, and then there are Asian mosques and so on.
And also Indonesian mosque.
Yeah, of course, there's a big Indonesian community. So in the Turkish mosque, for example, the khutbah will be in Turkish because that's like most of the people who would come to be part of the sermon. Whereas in Moroccan mosques, it's mostly in Arabic, and then they'll do a brief translation into Dutch. Because also I think it's about who they're targeting. And if they know that in the audience there are Dutch converts, for example, or Dutch Muslims, they also want those people to understand, but also the young generations, as you said, who wouldn't understand Arabic specifically. And I think it's also in the Dutch case that a lot of the migrants, the Moroccan migrants, are Amazigh, they're Berber. So Arabic is not their first language anyway.
No.
So because of that, they would probably be more comfortable with Dutch rather than Arabic. But this is my own understanding.
So Berber is very different language,
It is. There are 3 different Berber languages that survived from Morocco. And I think most of the migrants in the Netherlands come from the Rif. So they speak Rifia, which is like the northern Moroccan Berber language. Because there is like there are Berbers in the north, and then in the mountains in the west coast, or more to the west coast, and then to the more to the south.
Do they have a specific character? I mean, al-huruf?
Yeah, so they, for a long time, Amazighiya, the language was only oral, and that's why there were several languages and only 3 survived, because only 3 kind of carried on orally for generations. And now, because like there's more advocacy towards the Amazigh rights in Morocco, it was created into like a written language that is now an official language of the state as well. Yeah. So there are a few characters that people used for a long time that become part of the written text now. But I'm not sure if all the written characters are originally from the old times, or if some of them were created.
It could be a modified.
Modified. Yeah.
I just remember the title of the book written by Ibn Khaldun. I think it's a very long title, but it is very nice. Kitabul Ibar wa Diwanul Mubtada'i wal Khabar fi Ayyamil Arabi wal Ajami wal Barbar.
Yes.
وَمَنْ عَصَرَهُمْ مِنْ ذَوِي السُّلْطَانِ الْأَكْبَرِ.
Yeah, so
beautiful title.
It is, yeah. So the Berber communities lived within what is now North Africa. So they lived, there are communities even until now in Algeria and Tunisia, and I think in Libya as well. But some of their languages are still different.
So now we move on to your involvement in Indonesian Islamic studies.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. How is that you have contact with friends in Tripleiu?
Well, the story starts even before that because
Oh,
um, for a long time I was interested in the study of Indonesian
yeah,
Islam because
yep,
it's the largest Muslim community, of
yeah,
course,
yeah.
and a lot of Muslim or Islamic studies focus mainly in the Middle
Uh-huh,
East or the Arab world,
yeah,
whereas there are far more Muslims beyond the Middle East.
uh-huh,
So that's how it started, really. And then when I did my fieldwork in Morocco,
uh-huh.
a lot of Moroccans would speak about meeting Indonesians in Mecca and
Oh,
how that was a transformative experience for them. So they would say,
uh,
although all the pilgrims were fine, for example, the
uh-huh.
best pilgrims were the Indonesians.
Oh,
So they were the most organized and
uh-huh.
civilized, and they'll use these words to
Oh, yeah.
describe Indonesians. Yeah.
Oh,
So it
okay.
was really interesting.
Uh-huh,
But then when my colleague Sarah Mouhida was appointed to work at the Al Walid Center as
uh-huh,
well
uh-huh,
as the Southeast Asian Islam fellow,
uh-huh,
we got to talk more because she's Indonesian, but
uh-huh.
she did her studies in the U.S.
Okay.
and she came from the U.S., but
Oh,
she's Indonesian and
uh,
she worked on Shia communities and dawah online in Indonesia,
okay.
and other topics, of course,
Okay.
related to Southeast
It's
Asia.
very
So
interesting.
we had so many interesting conversations, and
Yeah.
she developed a course on Islam in Southeast Asia that she taught at the university. And
Uh-huh.
the students found it really fascinating because,
Uh-huh.
again, it shifted this focus from a very Middle East
Yeah.
focused
Yeah.
Islamic studies.
Mm.
And it was very interesting also because we started talking about different aspects of life in Indonesia. For example,
Yeah.
halal tourism and
Yeah.
how that is becoming more and more
Yeah.
important, and
Yep.
like the whole halal business as well.
Uh-huh.
And we also talked about indigenous communities in Indonesia and
Yeah.
how environmental issues are also something to look at when we study Indonesian society. So
Uh-huh.
we looked at so many different topics in our like conversations
Yep.
at the center.
Uh-huh.
And then she worked with Tripleiu
Oh.
to write a grant to the British Council about
Ah.
exploring different kinds of collaboration between the University of Edinburgh and
Tripleiu.
academics in Indonesia in general and
Oh.
Tripleiu in particular.
Okay.
So this collaboration started, I think, I can't generalize, but I think it started because she had close contact with Professor Nur Heidi Hassan from
Yeah.
Tripleiu.
Yeah.
And when she won this grant,
Yeah.
it meant that she could start a process of exploring different ways of collaboration between
Uh-huh.
Tripleiu and the Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies at the University of
Uh-huh.
Edinburgh.
Mm.
This included, for example, bringing scholars from here to come to Edinburgh as a visiting fellow,
Uh-huh.
and hopefully some students from here also will come to Edinburgh to get more research and education experience.
Okay.
And hopefully, like what we're exploring now is to have like a joint degree program in the future,
Uh-huh.
where the students would do 1 year in Edinburgh and 1 year here,
Uh-huh.
and then they'll go out with a double degree out of
Oh.
it.
Wow.
So, and this would be really interesting because we
Yeah,
do
yeah,
want
yeah.
our students to get an international experience
Yeah.
with students here,
Yeah.
and also to open up to like not a Eurocentric, let's say, kind of education to
Yeah.
a more like globalized education system.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's still under, because the bureaucracy is very long.
Of
So I
course,
think,
of course.
yeah, I think it's still under development,
Oh,
but we're
yeah.
hopeful that something good will come out of it.
Yeah, I hope so. Because we Indonesian have a long experience of working with other universities outside Indonesia.
Yes.
Like myself, for instance, I studied at McGill University
Okay.
for my master degree.
Yeah.
It was also a cooperation between our government and the government of Canada. The project was called Islamic Higher Education Project, something like that. And the scholarship was provided by CIDA at the time,
Okay.
Canadian International Development Agency. So I think this kind of cooperation is very, very good. I mean, very beneficial also for
Yes.
both countries. Do you have any experience of teaching Indonesian right now, or just you are going to do that? I mean,
Yeah, well, because of the COVID restrictions,
yes.
I had to do some online teaching for students
Oh,
here.
okay.
I gave 2 lectures to which were joint lectures to students at the University of Edinburgh and students at Tripleiu.
Yeah.
And I thought they were very successful because it was like bringing all these students together, and the online space made it possible and accessible. We had to do it very early in the morning UK time so that the students here wouldn't stay very late at school. But I think it was really interesting. And also we had Professor Nur Heidi give a lecture to both groups as well on his expertise and Salafism. So it was really interesting, and the conversation that come out are very different from when you have only like a Western kind of students or European students, when you have Indonesian students or international students that Tripleiu has. And also it was interesting to engage with them. Unfortunately, when I came for this visiting fellowship, I came just at the end of the semester, so the students were not here. But we had a conference at Tripleiu on Islam. And
last month, or
it was about 2.5 weeks ago.
Oh, it's July also.
Yes. So it was just after Eid. That was very interesting, and we had like also a very large and engaged audience. And then we had some other activities organized at other universities in Indonesia, which I enjoyed very much.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
For our university, yesterday I also signed the MOU with Tripleiu.
Okay.
And I hope maybe in one way or another, my students or my lecturers, our lecturers, you can be involved also in your cooperation with the Tripleiu. Recently, we have been trying to make what is called international class, something like that, because not every student have a good English or good in Arabic. So we have to select some people, and then if they have these competence in language, probably they can be participating in international class like what you do with the Tripleiu. You may have some suggestion or ideas about possible cooperation or at least engagement in academic life in your university or in cooperation with Tripleiu.
Well, I think one thing that is now becoming more and more popular, let's say, is online conferences.
Okay.
Because it is easier to organize, and you can get people from all over the world joining because it's digital. So we have different workshops that we held online, and we invited people from different parts of the world to engage. The last, I think, was organized by Al-Walid Center, my colleague Sarah Mohida, when Professor Nur Heidi was in Edinburgh. And it was online, but it was on Islam and human rights.
Okay.
And that brought a lot of interest from students in Indonesia who were able to join online. But I think not all the time the students know about these things. So I think it's important to have a platform maybe where students would know about these things and get informed when something like that is happening. Because even for students whose English might not be perfect, attending more of these events would help them also develop like how they can interact, for example, and how they reflect on these topics, because they're interesting topics but also current and have something to do with their studies. So that might be one way. Also, I think it would be interesting once this procedure is done between Edinburgh and Tripleiu to see how we can further extend the project, or get more students maybe from here to come to Edinburgh, and then to engage more with maybe visiting scholars, and to come hopefully during the academic year as well, to engage with the students themselves.
Yes, we hope so anyway.
Yes, inshallah.
Inshallah. So thank you very much for your time and for this very interesting conversation. I hope you will visit us again. This is not the first and the last one.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here, and I am very much impressed with the quality of organization, and also the campus as well.
Thank you. Shukran jazila.
Afwan, marhaba.